It's T-minus 2 weeks until the newest head of the MBTA officially steps into that role. When Luis Ramirez takes the helm, he'll be the 5th general manager the T's had since 2015, and he's getting a hefty pay hike. The former GE executive's annual salary will be a cool $320,000, with the possibility of up to $64,000 more in performance bonuses. That's compared to past GM salaries of about $175,000. The T says the pay boost was an effort to attract more qualified candidates, but in recent days, there have been plenty of questions about Ramirez's own qualifications. We knew when his hiring was announced 2 weeks ago that he had no transit experience, something Transportation Secretary Stephanie Pollack said wasn't high on the state's wish list. But we've since learned more about other parts of his resume. Turns out that Global Power, the company at which Ramirez said he increased earnings, announced 2 months after his resignation that it had misreported those numbers, and in the end they actually lost more than $47 million. Now, though, Ramirez is on to the T, overseeing subway, bus, and commuter rail for better or worse in snowstorms and in heat waves. He'll get the credit when things go well and plenty of blame when they don't. Joining me to discuss are Jim Aloisi, former Mass Secretary of Transportation, now a contributor to Commonwealth Magazine and a founding partner of Pemberton Square Group, and Jim Sturgis, Executive Director of the Pioneer Institute. Thank you both for coming in.
It's good to be with you.
Nice to hear you.
Let me start out by getting each of you to give me your top 3 item to-do list for what needs to change at the T. And let's start with Jim Aloisi.
What needs to change at the T? Well, I'd like to say the top 3 priorities.
Top 3 priorities.
First of all, completing state of good repair needs. $7.3 billion state of good repair gap. That work needs to be accelerated and take place together with, I think, improving customer service.
Okay, that's just stuff working the way it should.
Working the way it should,
right,
and improving it. Number 2, I think fare collection is a big issue. I think that's both the introduction of what's called AFC 2.0, a replacement of the Charlie card to be a much more modern and efficient way of approaching fares that will allow you to have, for example, all-door boarding on buses and trolleys. And a rationalization of commuter rail fares and zones, which I think is desperately needed. The third thing is strategic expansion. In my view, we need to, obviously, we're going to complete the Green Line extension, Silver Line to Chelsea. I hope the T explores in earnest bus rapid transit pilots and the overnight service pilot that I have been promoting. We call Night Bus for workers who leave work after midnight and who have to get to work in the early hours.
Okay, there are your top 3 very big priorities. How about you, Jim Sturgis?
Look, I think the first thing to think about is where the T has been in the past. It was blowing through a budget incredibly, and we've gotten to a place where we've actually managed our costs. The first thing is let's make sure we don't start blowing through the budget, and that means maintain the ability to outsource. You're not always going to use it. You're going to use it to negotiate with the unions to make sure you get good value for what you're paying. But let's maintain the ability to outsource. And bus maintenance outsourcing is a big piece of that this fall. It'll be very politicized. Number 2, focus, and Jim said this very well, $7.3 billion of repairs for state of good repair. Man, it goes beyond that. That doesn't even include commuter rail. So when you start piling that in, it's a ton of money. So it means focus, and this is where I would disagree with Jim, focus on the core system. If you change out the signals on the red line, you'll be able to double capacity there. That's a lot of people who pay in. That's good for the bottom line of the T.
So make the existing framework better as opposed to expanding it.
Absolutely. And the third one is leadership. Look, around Ramirez, the questions around Ramirez are not helpful in the sense that, he comes into a new situation, having people question his ability to run this thing is not good for the T. It's not good for him. But the leadership cadre at the T needs a lot of work. The Green Line extension we debated last year about costs. Why was that? Because they went through this ridiculous process of having sort of a cost-plus contract. The procurement team at the team, the capital procurement team, the one that does capital projects, needs a lot of work. But that's not just there. It's the entire team. We need to make sure we have the very best people to deliver on value. For a long time, we talked about labor. We need labor reforms. We actually need a bunch of management reforms at this point.
I will get back to Luis Ramirez in a moment, but let me ask you, too, what would happen, we've all been watching what's going on in Houston, if a storm like that or a storm like Hurricane Sandy hit Boston? What would the implications be for the T right now? Are we resilient yet or not?
Well, I think we'll find out if it happens. I mean, there was a significant flood, people may remember, several years ago. It's probably more than several years ago in Kenmore Square. And then we know about the winter of 2015. Now, this administration, to its credit, has put about $90 million toward a winter resiliency program. But all of then that was important work. We haven't been tested. We didn't have the kind of winter since then. I think that people, if they haven't been alert to resilience before 2015, they're alert to it now. And so I'm assuming that people know what they need to do. However, we have an old system. I was in Aquarium Station last week, and there's a flood. Things happen, and it's very hard to play catch-up when you're behind in your state of good repair needs.
We also have an urban core, which I remember post-Sandy, the Boston Harbor Association put out these maps of what, say, a 7.5-foot sea rise would look like, and it was terrifying. Yeah. You had all of central Boston submerged, and I assume the T would be right there.
The T would be right there, and look, the Green Line would be in terrible condition. There are a lot of tunnels that just would stop working. We have a lot of problems with our electrical system. I was hinting at that with signalization and all the rest. We need a big fix there. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. But even that wouldn't bring us the kind of resilience that would face this kind of storm. This is a big storm. I think we'd love it to be back up and running within 2 or 3 days after a storm like this, but running through a storm like this would be, Adam, frankly, pretty close to impossible.
Jim Eloise, we heard Jim Sturgis talk a little bit about the challenges that the new questions around Luis Ramirez are going to pose for him and the agency going forward. I should note here that what happened was we learned that Global Power, the company that he headed from, I think, 2012 through 2015, had these big accounting issues. We discussed them at the outset, but they sparked both an SEC investigation and an ongoing class action lawsuit. I was able to ask Governor Baker today if he was aware of the class action suit and the SEC investigation before Ramirez's hiring. Here is how he responded.
Yeah, we knew about the class action suit before he was hired. The MBTA did a thorough background on his performance in every job he had, and the recommendations and the references that he received were overwhelmingly positive. We're looking forward to having him on board. We think he's going to do a great job.
So, Jim Eloise, is this the right guy to run the agency, given that piece of his resume and his overall resume?
I think time will tell. I'm reluctant to talk about folks who are taking public office, since people talked about me when I took public office. So I'm very respectful of that.
I was always respectful.
I know you. But there's been some solid reporting on this, and it's certainly illuminating. And I think, look, the general manager of T coming in, if he pays attention to the values and the needs of the T riders, he's going to be fine. If he pays attention to nickel and diming the T and thinks all it's about is cutting costs, he's going to get in trouble. Pay attention to rider needs and rider values, and you'll be in good shape.
All right, hopefully he's watching. When he comes in, Jim Sturgis, is there anything in his resume, despite the concerns that have been raised in recent days, is there anything that makes you excited and makes you say to yourself, well, if that Luis Ramirez shows up, as opposed to the guy who had some issues at Global Power, then the T is going to be a better organization than it was before he got there?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think at GE there's a long record of actually taking on new products and developing new product lines. There's so much that's actually exciting you could do in the transit world. Think about the potential around ferries, for example, to bring people into the city of Boston, the Seaport District, the airport. Tons of things you could do if you think outside the box in terms of engaging vendors outside the existing system. I mean, ferry systems are kind of plug and play. You get a vendor, you have a contract, you have a sort of point-to-point service.
Yeah.
There's a lot you could do. He's the kind of person who can deliver on that. I do think that the stories around his background at Global Power, however, are a hit as he comes in. It makes it much more difficult to do hard things.
I was hoping to leave it on an upbeat note. You got a little downbeat there at the end, but we have something to look forward to potentially. Jim Sturgis, Jim Eloise, thank you both.
You're welcome.